Well, hello there and welcome back to Cybos TV. I'm Daisy McAndrew and we're continuing our chat here in the studio on all things regulatory, the regulatory avalanche. And I have 4 experts with me alongside me. Matt Nevins from SIFMA, welcome to the program. Good afternoon to you, Matt. Justin Chapman to my immediate right from Northern Trust. Thank you for joining me. Mead Reynolds, you're from Brown Brothers Harriman. Welcome to Cybos TV. And Jean-David Larson from Russell Investments. Good afternoon, Jean-David. Matt, maybe I can come to you first. Sure. What exactly are we talking about, this avalanche? What does it contain?
A lot of regulation. So we're getting hit by all sides from both the United States regulators and the overseas regulators. As expected, really, in the fallout from the financial crisis in 2008, the global financial regulators have really put out quite a large amount of new rules, and it's been an onslaught for everybody. Investment managers have not been spared at all, and we had a discussion earlier today, and we'll continue that here, on how the investment management industry is dealing with this whole new onslaught of regulation that's coming at them, again, both domestically and internationally, how they're building out communication systems, oversight, making sure that they've got the right people plugged in. We used an example of transparency and new reporting rules, both coming out of Europe and the CFTC as it relates to derivatives, Solvency II, AIFMD, the private fund regulations under Form PF. Then we talked about how there are conflicting rules to some degree amongst the US and domestic regulators, and how investment managers are able to build out their systems and try to plan when there is a divergence among those regulators. We're seeing that in the clearing space, where the CFTC has already rolled out their central clearing mandate, and now we're seeing the clearing requirements go into effect in Europe under EMIR. However, the CFTC has not yet recognized European clearinghouses as being equivalent, and in Europe they have not done the same, partially because their law requires the CFTC and the US regulators to act first.
It is a ridiculously confusing picture, isn't it? Jean-David, do you feel as if you're being pulled every which way?
Absolutely. One of the things we talked about in the panel this morning is that the regulations are global, and so anyone who's doing work globally or for clients globally is being caught. The number of products that you manage, the types of strategies you run, the types of clients you deal with, and the jurisdictions all multiply your complexity by several factors. So I think one of the things that you have to do is be flexible enough to deal across those jurisdictions and have the capacity and expertise to do that. It's one of the challenges I know we and our entire industry have faced, and it's going to continue for the foreseeable future, so we all have to embrace the new reality.
All right, well, let's embrace the new reality. Justin, let's cheer ourselves up. Are there any silver linings to this situation? Sprinkle a little dust, a little starlight on it.
Absolutely. So I think with any significant change, whether it's market infrastructure, regulatory change, there is opportunity. I think you have to be positioned very well as an organisation, be agile, be willing to be open-minded, and also collaborate with a bit more with your colleagues in the industry in itself. So I think you need to look holistically across the different silos of the business, but not just at your business line, and really what does the client need from a regulatory perspective, and what's your counterparty's requirements as well, because the models will change. Different organisations will function in different ways, they'll operate in different levels within the current infrastructure and current value chain. So as things change, I think if you're agile, you consult well, and you've got the right investments and the right strategy, there will always be opportunities, because there will be other organisations that don't quite adjust to the opportunities that will come through.
Do you think that there is that love in the room, that collaborative feeling, because it must sometimes go against the grain?
I think historically it would have gone against the grain, but I think you've seen at this particular event a good direction in that collaboration, and a lot of announcements where different organisations are joining together to come up with solutions across the piece for the client. And I think that's a really important element. I think we'll start to see that trend moving forward. I think organisations won't be able to offer the current product suites because of capital constraints and liquidity challenges. So as those adjust, I think they'll find natural partners and organisations that can fit together to offer the end client and the end investor the products and services they need. So a bit of a new dawn, but I think there's certainly opportunities here. And as Northern Trust, we certainly see those opportunities to work with and collaborate with other organisations.
It is interesting, Mead, isn't it? It is a new dawn, and different people are going to slot into it in different ways.
That's right, and again, looking at the glass half full, to follow on Justin's point about opportunities, we do think that the regulatory environment doesn't need to be a bad thing. If you embrace it and say it's the new norm and have confidence that at some point the regulatory environment globally will be harmonized and there'll be some ability to have common standards and best practices and the cost and investment will be moderated, then asset managers do have an opportunity to look to maybe the more conservative investors who, whether that's a retail or an institution that is a little bit more risk averse, but embraces and welcomes the regulatory environment and says, this is maybe a safer haven for me. I will step off the sidelines, dip my toe into the water and invest in this asset class. So there's some opportunities there for some new investors.
Jean-David, have you seen that perhaps the new investors are slightly more conservative, as Mead was saying, and that, that's sort of a new reality?
Yes, I think the first thing you're seeing is investors extricate a little bit out of certain products. And that's natural because those products have always been complex and they're being asked to do more and more as a client than they did before. Before that used to happen behind the scenes, that happened by the market intermediaries, the asset managers, the asset servicing providers, but now clients are having to shoulder more of that burden. So over time, I think that will shift, but in the meantime, that's putting a lot more burden on clients, and until they fully understand what that means to them and how they are going to manage their risk, I think they're rightfully being somewhat tepid, and then other clients who are more well-resourced to move quickly are taking advantage of those opportunities now.
It's interesting that mention of education, that it takes the experts in the field a long time to work out what the new regulations mean, let alone educating customers and clients about what it all means. And then just as you think you've got your head around it, everything changes, or so it's a constant educational process.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I mean, that's one of the reasons that we use the word avalanche. It doesn't end, and it's continuing to keep coming. We're continuing to see more and more out of the regulators, new regulation, new areas that they're focusing on. And that's something that we do as a trade association at the SIFMA Asset Management Group. We work with people like Jean-David at Russell, working with our members on educating them on the new requirements and how they can evolve their businesses in this new marketplace as the markets themselves react and respond to the new regulations that are coming out. So then Jean-David can then turn around and educate his clients that he works with to make sure that we're all harmoniously working together to the fullest extent possible as the financial landscape changes.
Well, I suppose the point of the regulation, one of the many points of the regulation, apart from a sense of slight punishment, which is what a lot of people feel, is that it's about trust, and it's about the regulators, putting in place a new system whereby people can trust that system. But there's so much mistrust around for a lot of it. It's very difficult to see when we're going to get to that nirvana.
I think there's certainly a lot of themes in regulation that we're picking up on. Obviously, systemic safety for institutions to operate with each other is very important. But at the end of the day, for the pension funds and us as pension contributors, asset safety is absolutely got to be key through the value chain. So I think a lot of the regulations, when you boil it down to core themes, whether it's asset safety, cost of ownership through the fund structured products, provision of liquidity and capital to support these products, actually, as that framework builds out and the products and services are demonstrated to tick those boxes, I think that should give some investors a confidence again in the infrastructure and the system. And actually transparency was another thing we talked about a lot. And there's a lot of effort around providing transparency through that value chain, through reporting to regulators, but also to the end investors coming a common theme as well now. So hopefully, using that positive outlook, we can start to see the benefits of that kicking in.
That's right. Alongside that, trust is really investor protection, and it's hard to argue against the concept of investor protection and making sure that the proliferance of the alternative space is suitable for the retail investor in particular, and so at the end of the day, we all would agree that that protection is a requirement. So it's just dealing with the avalanche in the short term is the challenge.
The short-term pain. Well, let's look forward to Sibos 2015. Jean-David, are we still going to be sitting in this studio discussing yet more regulations, or do you think the tide will have turned a bit by this time next year?
I think we'll have iterated more through some of the things that are already come out, so I don't think you'll have as big of a second avalanche. I think it'll be a continuation of a slide, if you will. So we'll just have to navigate that. I mean, I think one of the things that will be interesting to see, sometimes it feels like we're in the middle of drug trials, but you're taking the live antibody without being certain exactly what it's going to cure and how it's going to cure it.
Waiting to see where the big boil's going to come.
Exactly. So I think it's an ongoing process. I think that's part of the challenge, is we're trying to move, the regulators want to move quickly, policymakers want to move quickly, so we're having to kind of test it as we go. But it's an industry that's having to test it, not a sample set or pilot.
Well, exactly. People do feel like guinea pigs, with this so much new regulation, and you're not quite sure what are the unintended consequences of some regulations. Have you seen any bad unintended consequences so far?
I think so, but I think what I'd like to start off with, by saying is that not all of these regulatory change is necessarily a bad thing. In fact, we were very supportive of the need for some of these market changes that came out of Dodd Frank following the 2008 financial crisis, and indeed globally throughout the world. Rebuilding trust and confidence in the financial industry is a key fundamental point for, I think, all of us within the financial industry, certainly for us at SIFMA. And as asset managers, I work on the asset management side of SIFMA. Asset managers are the ultimate fiduciaries of their clients. So we take that role and responsibility very seriously to act in our clients' interest at all times. So restoring and rebuilding that trust and confidence is key. That said, yes, there are some unintended consequences. I think there's been some significant impact on liquidity. We're worried about market fragmentation, particularly, again, if we're going to see different rules that don't mesh well on different timelines between the United States, Europe, and in other Asian and other jurisdictions throughout the world. Hopefully, the regulators will be able to work together more harmoniously to come up with regulation where the markets themselves don't become divided, and there really truly is global liquidity as we move forward.
Okay, well, Matt, we're going to leave it on that semi-optimistic note. I think I can put it like that. Matt Nevins from SIFMA, Justin Chapman from Northern Trust, Mead Reynolds, Brown Brothers Harriman, and Jean-David Larson from Russell Investments. Gentlemen, thank you very much for continuing our discussion on regulations, the avalanche of regulations. Stay with us in just a couple of minutes. We're going to have yet more on this subject. Bye-bye.